Okay, good morning, everyone. Just I'll quickly check if everybody can hear me loud and clear, and if the voice is coming through good on your side. I know some of you have let me know that it's breaking up a bit.
Fine from my side, thank you.
Okay.
Also from my side.
Okay, cool. So let's get started. So welcome to this webinar this morning. I want to share a bit in terms of the things that we have done over the past, I would say, year and a half. Share some of the things that we've struggled with, but in the format of something that you can typically use, take away, to your own respective organizations, and maybe see what you can leverage from what you've seen today. I think one of the big things that we should all just remember is to set the scene is everybody's a different maturity in terms of data governance, and we've had a fair amount of challenges in terms of politics, company changes, responsibility, IT versus business over the past few years. So how do we cope with an ever-changing environment and make sure that data governance actually survives all these storms that it gets thrown with almost on a daily basis? So I just want to go next. So topic for today is implementing data governance and sort of where to start, what you need to look at, and sort of the things that you need to look out for. Some of the topics we'll cover, firstly, is embarking on a data governance journey, the reason for why you're looking at it, and if you started with it, where you currently are. Secondly, implementing a data governance structure within the organization, typically how that should look like. Getting business buy-in, which I think is probably one of the most difficult challenges that we faced over the past few years. And then just great ways of adopting or driving adoption within the organization, things that we have found that really works really well with minimal effort and minimal cost. So just as an intro, hi, I'm Zjaen Coetzee, for those of you that don't know me. Been around telco industry for some time, spent quite a lot of time in data warehousing, then spent some time in analytics teams, and then back into data warehousing, and then into data science, big data, master data, reference data, content management, and then back into the data science, data management things over the past few months. So implementing a data governance strategy or implementing a data governance framework within your organization is probably, I think, one of the most daunting things when you start looking at it. I think Idri, that's also on the call, she spent quite a lot of time within BCX context to get the things up and running. But last year around April, we were given the challenge to say, well, let's maybe embark on something and see how we can do this work in organization. And then you start reading up in all the papers and you see there's hundreds and thousands of things that you need to look at and all these variables and factors that you need to take into account. And then it becomes a really daunting thing because there's this mountain in front of you and you don't really know how to approach it. I think the one thing that we sort of got back to was the reason for why we're starting this. Now, the main three things that we sort of picked up from dealing with other organizations as well. First of all, people start looking at data governance from a place of fear. So things like POPI, GDPR starts popping up and they don't really know what it is. Everybody talks about it. People haven't really taken the time or effort or made the conscious effort to actually read through those acts. And the people that have done have made some great, headway over the past few years. But predominantly, the majority of the people is afraid of something and they don't really know what that something is. And because of that, they start looking at data governance. The second one that we found with a lot of organizations is peer pressure. So this is where you typically go and you speak to people and they say, well, we've started data governance. We've now signed a bunch of executive data stewards within the organization. We have councils and forums and workflows and all these things going. But at the end of the day, very few people have been successful when they're trying to copy what other organizations have done. Mainly because of the fact that it doesn't necessarily suit or fit your organization in the same sense. And then the third one is sort of where I think a lot of us found ourselves is in terms of we have that hello moment we finally had that wake-up call, and we realized that we actually need to drive data as a strategic asset. Or from the other side of the coin is you've heard of this, and you sort of want to sort of checking out and exploring it to see if there is actually any value in looking and exploring data within the organization and seeing it as a strategic asset. Now, when we look at data as a strategic asset, just as a brief overview from that perspective, is we've been mandated a few times over the past few years to start monetizing data. Now, that in itself is not driving data as a strategic asset. I see it in terms of we have a building, how building is working, our lights is working, air cons are working, there's water everywhere. Where people need to have water, the escalators are working, the elevators are working, the stairs are nice, the doors are opening and closing, the fire alarms is working, everything is just working, and that is a conducive environment for the employees to come into every day, to conduct their work, and when they leave, that the building remains in a similar or same state when they came in. Unfortunately, we don't do that with data. We try to cut corners in terms of capturing the data, managing the data, purely because of the fact it comes down to bottom line. ROI is really important, driving EBITDA is important, optimizing cost is important, and having to spend time and money and effort in something like data governance is not necessarily on everyone's radar. Personally, I think it should be, mainly because of the fact that's sort of where the gold nuggets within your organization actually lies. You have a lot of views in terms of what's happening across your organization. And when we talk data, we're talking about data that's just sitting on a database, sitting somewhere. We're not talking about, columnar or row-based data sets. We're not talking about traditional data warehouses. We're not even talking about big data. Data in totality encompasses everything in terms of data that gets generated within your organization. These can be calls, it can be emails, it can be documents sent, it can be customer contracts, it can also be the traditional databases that you have. But all these data sets across your organization, at the end of the day, when you interrogate, it does tell you a story. From personal experience, one of the things that we found is it took us about 6 months trying to understand who our customers actually are and what products they actually have, because for many years we've been so focused on selling the actual products that nobody's actually gone back, validated, tested, and verified the data that's sitting on the underlying databases. We've also found that some of the customer contracts, for instance, wasn't accurate or correctly drafted, purely because of the fact where people got, things got lost in translation. I send a mail to somebody, they've got a different understanding of what I mean. They had something into the contract, and it's got this whole ripple effect throughout the organization. So when we talk about data in the context today, we're looking at data across end-to-end, everything that sits within your company. Some of those things can be governed, obviously. Some of it is a bit more difficult to govern. How do you govern incorrect data captured on an email sent to a person? That is really difficult. So just a high-level thing is when we stop chasing the wrong things, we give the right things a chance to catch us. And in this sense, we're trying to always chase, well, we want better data, cleaner data, we want data governance. But what is the business value and business benefit that we gain? Is there needs to be a tangible value that we derive from it. Just having clean data doesn't have any benefit.
Hi.
Hello. There's a bit of an echo.
Okay. Hello.
Can everybody just please mute?
Can you mute from your side?
Let me quickly check.
Can you mute everybody from your side?
Let me check if I can quickly mute everyone. Okay, I think everyone is muted now. That should be muted. Is it better?
Are we muted?
Can I just request everybody that joined to also just mute as you come into the call? There's still one person that's not muted. Can everybody just please mute that's on the call?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I'm gonna teleconference until 11 o'clock, and then actually I'm free until 12. So just give me a buzz when you're downstairs. Before 12.
Right, I just want to quickly check. Okay, that's better. Okay, everybody can still see my screen. So let's go. Okay, so just getting back to the point is if we refer to data, we refer to data that's everything all-encompassing within an organization. So when we have to look at something like data governance, it's not a question of why or how, but it's a question of when. It needs to happen. It's going to happen. When we look at global trends in terms of organizations, the one thing that really sets or differentiates organizations from other ones are the ones that's actually leaving the data as a strategic asset. These are the people that's looking at interrogating the data that they have, that's taking the time when they have an interaction with a customer to actually capture the correct data, not pages and pages of information, but the most valuable information in order for them to drive their business, first of all, in terms of which products are selling, which ones are not selling, which regions do we need to sell in, what type of color schemes do we need to use, what advertising do we need to use, what channels works and what doesn't work. And if we look at global trends, and this was a study done last year, is the top 5 things that companies typically look at from a data perspective and where they're using data as a strategic objective or advantage is, first of all, better relationship with customers, understanding where their customers are, how do we talk to them, finding them at the right place at the right time. Then also driving, insight for better decision making, understanding when to sell, when not to sell, when to buy, when not to buy, when to hire people, when not to hire people. Third one, which I think is sort of where the actual data management component, data governance comes in, is more effective, more efficient business practices in terms of optimizing things in our business that doesn't work. Fourthly, improved marketing efforts and then compliance with regulations. And as we see regulations being forced down on organizations within South Africa, you'll actually see compliance with the regulations starting to move up over the next few years. Now, all of these things are all reactive. It's all reactive things in terms of we are waiting for something to happen, and then we sort of want to, intervene or do something retrospectively. Now, if we look at data and the ability for us to actually analyze data, manage data properly, there's a component of it that comes towards prediction and, looking at a propensity for something to happen. Can I just ask everybody that joined now to mute as well, please? Sorry, guys, there's another late joiner that hasn't muted. Okay. So getting into the nuts and bolts of this. So when we implement the data governance structure, we need some support. Let's just do this. There's no mute all option, sorry. Okay. So getting into the nuts and bolts of data governance is, first of all, you will need some support. This is not something that you can tackle on your own. You will unfortunately need business buy-in, which I think a lot of organizations, it's really difficult to convince people to buy into an idea where they don't really have a view of what that tangible benefit is. Later on, I'll also show you that there's ways and means of you actually to measure some of the things, to quantify the data risk. It can be as easy as 1 to 3. So first of all, the one thing that you need to do when you're starting out with data governance practice, and this is one of the things that we've tried now multiple times, and each time is shown to actually prove valuable, is determine, first of all, the goals that we want to achieve with data governance, and secondly, who's the data owners. And later on, we'll also discuss that debate because there's currently a lot of noise around who should be the actual owners of the data. There's a difference between being a custodian of a platform that's looking after the data and the actual person that owns that information or that data within the organization. Secondly is to create support and governing structures. And these can either be little teams that help drive this initiative from day one, or bigger governance streams or teams as you go along, as this thing matures within your organization. From day one, if you don't really know what it is that you want to tackle, I would not suggest going and creating formal structures from the top down. It's going to be extremely difficult to maintain, and things will fall flat very quickly. Thirdly is drive change and track KPIs, and this is extremely difficult. Getting people to understand that they have a role to play within the organization when it comes to data. Every single person on every single seat within every single organization has an impact on data, whether they like it or not. The magnitude of the impact will obviously differ in terms of their roles, if they're data stewards capturing the data, or it's somebody just consuming the information, making decisions based on the information that they've received. Taking this little triangle into account, it is fairly easy to kickstart something and try and test it and see how it works. One of the things we've also seen is it's really beneficial to fail fast. Start something, test it, run it for a week or 2 weeks during a sprint. If it doesn't work, can it, move on to the next one. Spending months and months at a time trying to fix something where we're not exactly sure what the benefit is going to be of fixing that something is not worth the time, effort, and resource cost of the organization in totality. Now, where should data governance sit? Now, ideally within an organization, you should have, and when you see this, a lot of companies will not have a chief data officer, unfortunately. And that's mainly one of the main things there is, it's because people are not seeing data as a strategic thing that should be driven, managed separately from the normal business operations. You will have the chief operating officers and revenue officers and sales officers and all these people that's driving massive portfolios that's actually moving the company forward. But the people working with the data don't do that in isolation, however. They typically find themselves as little pockets within these other organizations, all trying to compete, all working on the same data, waiting for data handovers to happen between these organizations, and data governance becomes a complete mess. So when you start, it's good to identify a person that even if they don't fulfill the role, get the title, get the pay, or everything else that you ideally want to get with it, is to identify that one person or a team of people that can fulfill the role of the chief data office. And within this data office, you will determine how the data governance councils and data stewardship councils will be set up. You will determine how your executive data stewards will be managed and how those people will be identified. And here it's very important not to link it to specific people and names within the organization. As people change and they come and they move out of a company, you don't want to leave that hole empty within your governance structure, else it will fail. You will need to link it to a specific role. So if you have a sales manager, for instance, that fulfills the role of chief or executive data steward, if that person leaves, whoever then replaces him or takes over some of that responsibility will then fulfill that role and plug that gap. There you also need to critically assess it. It might be that due to the changes in the organization, you won't always need the same contingent of people from executive data steward perspective to represent your entire organization. Other things to take into account there is your data analysts, your data owners, and all these guys will be managed, identified, and sort of facilitated by your central data governance office. In companies where they have taken the conscious decision to actually get a CDO, these things work a bit better. If your CDO reports directly into your CEO, even better. If they report into CFO or Chief Digital Office or Chief Information Office, depends on where they land, their role and their mandate also shifts. And the lower down and the further disconnected they become, the less impact they actually have on the organization. You can only do as much as you can as a little pocket of team within an organization. So there it is really important to look at that. When you consider these things, determine how you're going to position yourselves. A CIO and a CDO is not the same thing. Both have equally important roles to fulfill. But the chief data officer is the guy that's focusing on doing the right things. Where do we put our efforts in? What are the things that we need to focus on? What does our data strategy look like? Your CIO is the guy that actually manages the system where all this data lives on, and he ensures that the things are done right, that the platforms are managed, the security is implemented as it should be, and that IT and business in the entire organization is actually supported fully. Where your CDO is more focused on the data. And we have seen this in the past in our own organization where the CIO has tried to fulfill the role of both, and it becomes really difficult to manage both portfolios. It requires a lot of attention, a lot amount of effort and hours to actually drive this thing correctly. It cannot be a sidecar project. It cannot be something that you do as your tertiary job function, where you that's the thing that you do between 5 and 6 every day before you leave the office. It is something that you need people that are vested in, you need people that have identified themselves that can really add value to this organization within your greater company. Now, when we look at the model, so this is sort of how the high level looks. How do you manage this thing now throughout your organization? First of all, you can do a centralized model where you have one data governance team and one central business unit that then manages a different subject area. So you will have one data governance office, one business unit, and they will, over different regions, maybe manage things like customer, product, vendors, etc., etc. This works really well if you're a company that is completely confined to sort of single business line of business, where you have sort of one product set, you're operating across multiple regions, but your core business is sort of one main function, and you don't have a bunch of disparate things sitting all over the organization. Second thing is a replicated model, similar to the first one, but now you have different business units. You will have a business unit that, for instance, specializes in logistics. You will have a business unit that specializes in warehousing, and one that specializes in retail. Each one of them managing their own data governance, running their own things, and reporting into a centralized data governance function within each one of those BUs. And then you have the federated model, which is the model that we've adopted, is where there's one centralized data governance that manages across the entire group, that they acknowledge the fact that they know that across the group, we should have a single view of a customer. Across the group, we should have a single master data record for specific product sets and vendors, etc. Under each one of these, you will have business units, and every business unit, to a certain extent, will have their own data governance forums, their own data governance councils, and their own data stewards. But all of them get strategy and direction from a centralized data governance office. They also report into the centralized data governance office. Within each one of the BUs, there are things that then obviously make them unique in terms of a subject area that they typically focus on from a data perspective. They manage those subject areas, and it can be that certain subject areas might find themselves in different business units. Like you will, for instance, have subject area A, which is, for argument's sake, customer, and that would be something that's actually predominantly seen in business unit 1, but it also makes its way into business unit 2. How do they manage those entities, and how do all of those roll up, to a single records at the end of the day? Now, the inconvenient truth is that the majority of people throughout the world actually think that IT needs to manage data and needs to own data. This is a bit of a problem, because if you think about it, IT is the people that manages the platform. Now they need to take responsibility for the data that comes into the platform as well. If you are the business owner of a specific business unit, and we push you to drive your customers, because you are the owner of customers, so you're the chief sales officer, and your main focus is customers, you should be the owner of those customer records. The KPI that you should be measured against, one of those KPIs, is actually the accuracy of those records for those customers. How detailed you capture it, and how you manage your business by actually driving and updating those records. 91% of C-level executives believe the responsibility of data quality should be ultimately lie with the business with occasional help from IT. If we look at some of the slides a bit further on, we see that the predominantly of the data ownership gets shifted towards IT. Now, if we need to fix this, it means there needs to be somebody in a seat with budget, with mandate, with authority to actually get it done. Globally, 53% of people have budget and authority and enact data policies. I think these are larger corporates. I don't think these are necessarily taking companies into account that's new to the game. 34% of those they have some authority, but they are limited in certain areas. So they can fix some stuff and they can spend some money, but they're limited in terms of what they do. 8% of that is there's some authority, but data is not a key priority for them. Business as usual, driving bottom line, getting revenue in, getting, EBITDA up. And then 5% of those people have very limited authority. When we take this picture, and this is a US-based picture, when we take this towards South Africa, I think this thing is actually completely inverted. From what we've seen is a lot of organizations have data owners, but those data owners have very limited authority in terms of what they can do to execute. They see that the data is incorrect. They see that there's opportunity to enrich it, to drive it as a strategic asset. But the moment they raise it and they raise the component of cost, they get turned down and say, sorry, it's not a priority for us at this stage. We'd rather focus on our customers. We'd rather focus on our products. We'd rather focus on our sales. Which at the end of the day actually hinders your ability to do business. When you start with data governance, I think the most important thing is first of all to do a reality check in terms of where it is that you currently find yourself. I think a lot of organizations, from what I've seen, is between the reactive and the proactive stage. There's a lot of things that they're doing proactively. They're getting the business ownership, they're getting sponsors, they're getting charters and success metrics in place. But they also have a lot of things where there's tactical fixes within departmental silos that still needs to be done, where people go and fix things that breaks every single day instead of fixing things for the future. There's a lot of roles within an organization that's not necessarily linked to specific data, where people will fulfill a role where they consume a lot of data, generate a lot of data, but ownership is not necessarily assigned. When you look at this landscape, we need to determine where it is that you typically find yourself. I think that we're currently working towards is we're sitting between proactive and optimized at this stage. A lot of the things are still reactive. I would say there's about 20% things still reactive, but predominantly the majority of it's now moving towards proactive. And we're trying to identify what are the next things or the next steps that we need to get to that optimized space. And in the optimized space, sort of you have your data in check and you can now assign a single person, to manage this across your organization in the form of a CDO. And you can put accountability on that single person to say you're accountable for all the data within this organization. You need to make sure that all the data assets are run, managed, and executed. They should be according to the data strategy. Obviously, the data ownership itself will still sit within the business unit. Data quality currently shouldn't be managed or shouldn't be measured as something that you're just doing to sort of get that check. A lot of people do that in terms of we want to run data quality, but I got an audit and the audit says I need to report on how many fallouts I have, how complete my data is, and how accurate it is, and you drive that and you push that. What that does is it doesn't give you that ownership in terms of why does it actually that you want to fix this record? Why is it important that these things are complete? Why is it important that there is data ownership assigned? Because once you realize that, then you know the only end state that you can actually work towards is optimized. Reactive is a very scary place to actually find yourselves in. It's a space where you're continuously firefighting, is where when you're getting reports from your IT teams or from BI, you're continuously questioning those numbers. When you see things don't add up. You ask 5 people for a report and you get 10 different answers. It is a space where the company doesn't move forward because it takes too long in order to get an informed decision, and your data integrity is not what it's supposed to be. So where do you want to land? Now, if we look at a breakdown of how companies typically find themselves, you would see that it's basically, it's everybody sort of finds themselves in a quartile. There's optimizers around, currently about 20% of people in there. Proactive, there's about 22% of people in there. Reactive, there's a lot of people in there, 28%. And then inactive, about 29% of organizations find themselves in an inactive state, which means that they acknowledge data is there, but not really much is being done. So how do we get business buy-in, and why should we help them? First of all is, from a bad side of the story, is there's a massive stick that can hit them if the data is not governed correctly. The first one of those is financial impacts of bad data. People make decisions, you deliver products to customers, you build things incorrectly, you price things incorrectly. Secondly is confidence and satisfaction impact of bad data. And this we've seen is customers are expecting one thing and they're getting something else. Well, I think almost every person that's ever bought a hamburger from any place ever has seldomly seen that the burger that they deliver on your table is similar to the one on the picture. You do get those restaurants where they sort of try to keep it there, but I mean, as if we look at things like like a Big Mac on the picture and the Big Mac that you actually receive doesn't even remotely look the same. And there's a direct impact in terms of confidence and satisfaction in terms of customers, is we are not giving across the correct data. We are giving across a false sense of what it should look like. And because of that, we're impacting confidence and we're impacting the satisfaction of our overall customers. Thirdly is sort of the scary one, and this is the one where a lot of people don't really know why they're doing it, but they know they need to do it, is risk and compliance impacts of bad data. And if you look at things like GDPR and how that gets enforced, it can really hit your company hard from an overall, fine perspective for every single breach that you do find. So there's sort of the bad end to this, and there's also the good end to this. There's things that you can actually start enabling your company to do, make smarter decisions, deliver products at a better cost price point, to enter into markets that you've never really explored before, to optimize your business with inefficiency in terms of where am I stocking things, where I should not be stocking things, what routes do I need to travel from a logistics perspective. Those are the positive things. But unfortunately, most data governance initiatives sort of start from the base of we're in a bad spot and we need to find ways of sort of maneuvering across financial impacts, confidence and satisfaction impacts, and risk and compliance impacts, rather than moving towards what are the new things that we can explore from a data perspective that we've never been able to do before. So there's a few things that you can do. I think the one thing that we try to do over the past few years is to quantify this risk. When you go to an exco session and you try to tell them, listen, I need resources, I need licenses, I need platforms, I need time and effort and a formal structure in order to drive this thing, the first question that they always ask you is, what is it going to cost me and what is the impact and value to my business at the end of the day? So in order to quantify that, it's extremely, extremely difficult if you don't know where to start. So what I've done is I've just listed a few things here in terms of what it is that you can look at. First of all is what makes this a critical business problem. Not everything that breaks every single day is critical to business, even though we would like to admit it. There is things that we can live with, and there's a area that we need to try and focus on to determine what is that criticality to the business and how do we assess that level of criticality. Secondly is what are the business impacts? So if this thing does break, what is the impact to business? Are we going to lose customers? Are we going to lose stock? Are we going to suffer reputational damage, et cetera, et cetera? Thirdly is how is the business problem related to an application or data issue? So here we need to find is not every problem that we have within our business, unfortunately, is also linked back to bad data. However, data can sometimes help us solve those things. So where do we draw that link, that sort of golden thread to determine we have a problem and this problem is related to a data issue? There is a poor relationship, for instance, between our vendor data and the things that's actually flowing through to procurement. There's a poor lineage between our actual products and our billing platform. And once you've identified that, you can sort of start to quantify it a bit more in terms of, well, this is the impact. We've got 100,000 services. These services are not being billed correctly, and this is the cost that goes along with it. How often does this data issue occur? We have found that some issues do occur maybe once every 12 months, once every 3 years. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't need as much attention, but typically you want to find the things that reoccurs every single day, because all these small things do add up at the end of the day in terms of driving costs within your organization. So both time frame and the percentage of interactions of transactions to gauge the frequency and probability of this occurrence, to see, other than the fact that it's happened, what is the likelihood of this thing happening again? And when will it happen again? When the data issue does then actually occur, is it something that happens automatically? Is it, we have a trigger or flag in the system that says, master data record captured incorrectly, or record coming into the data warehouse is stored incorrectly on the ODS. Or sensor data is all of a sudden we're getting data from weather SA and all of a sudden there's no information for the rainfall. If it's automated, it's easier to manage, but there's a lot of things where we can't always link this back. And this is, I think, one of the most difficult ones within this steps to go and look at is when it occurs, is how is it identified? Does it happen like 5 weeks down the line? You've made a business decision, you started executing on a business plan, and all of a sudden you realize the data that you've used to make your decision on was completely incorrect, or some of the rules imposed on that data set was actually incorrect. Then how often is the data issue identified before the business impact is incurred? So do we need to suffer 100 times before there's actually any impact to business? So, if one customer's billing details is incorrect, it is sort of insignificant in terms of the greater scheme of things. If it is 100 customers, for argument's sake, that is not receiving their bill or that gets billed incorrectly, there is a ripple effect to the business, and the scope and the size of that also needs to be identified. Then lastly is, what is the remediation task, or what do you actually do to fix this? And this is something really critical that you need to assess. When you're starting with data governance, you won't be able to conquer the whole world in one day. You can't boil the ocean. You need to identify where there's a small, quick win for you to focus all your efforts on. And once you have that, and you've now identified, listen, I have a problem. My customer groupings on my database is not updated as it should be. I'm sitting with 70% of them not being populated. What do I then do to fix it? Who are the role players that I need to get involved? What are the processes? What are the policy and the overtime and all these other things that we need to take into account at the end of the day? And sort of weigh that against what is the benefit that we will get if we then do this. Remediation is one of the things that very few companies do really, really well. And it's mainly because of the fact that a lot of us sort of chase towards the fact, I want to get to the problem and I want to know how big the problem is. Once you know what the problem is, what are you going to do about it? It is no use knowing that the world is going to end tomorrow if you have no plan B in terms of what it is that you're going to do. So that is something really important to just consider is, once you sort of scope this out and you start to quantify what the risk is to the business, if it's something related to cost or effort, whatever else it might be, what is the remediation task that you will take, and what are those steps, and what's the process to actually then get it done, and make sure that once you've done this once, ensure that it's sort of fixed and doesn't happen again. Because it's also good to sort of see, well, I got a report, the data was incorrect, let me quickly fix it. And then a month down the line, a similar person within the organization needs to draw a similar report, but they don't know about the work that you've done in order to remediate this error. And they go and they do it themselves again. And then you get, it's a ripple effect. It should be something that is sustainable, that gets updated on a source system or on point of creation or point of contact, so that when it does get fixed, other people can benefit from it, or at least formally noted somewhere that people have access to it. Some great ways to drive adoption and driving change management. Now, is there quick wins? The short and the long answer is yes and no. I think there's ways and means of maneuvering around this, but you need to identify sort of those sweet spots where business is really burning, where you can add a lot of value. One of the things that we've attempted to do to a fair amount of success is to bridge the gap between IT and business. And doing this is by incorporating them into a multidisciplinary team. So you get a few business people involved, a few IT people involved, and an independent party in the middle, which should ideally be from your data office, to say, let's see how we can tackle this problem together. The majority of the problems that you do face within the data landscape has a component of business ownership to it, as well as IT from a platform perspective. Obviously, on your IT systems, if the rules are not there and data governance is not enforced correctly in terms of policies and procedures and all of that, it's also going to open the door for a lot of other problems. So getting a few people together in the room and trying to drive that from a centralized, let's sort of call it a task team, to drive specific problems within the business. And through that, showing that, listen, there is value in us fixing data and we can do this. And this is the process of how we get to it. And it becomes a sustainable thing. And then you make it fun. Getting back to the ownership is if IT owns the data, 51% of organizations say that the IT department should own the data. Now, if IT owns the data and IT runs the systems, how will IT know what data to fix, what data is important, and where to put all the efforts? This picture is completely skewed in terms of, if we look at the rest of the stuff, is people say they're moving towards a maturity. A lot of them are still reactive, but the data ownership is still not assigned to the right people. 31 of organizations are heading down the right path where they're assigning it to the CEO, but the CEO solely can't be responsible for all the data within the organization. 20% of them assign it to the CIO, which is essentially the same as assigning it to the IT department. And then 18% of it then distributes it across other organizations. And then 14% of it actually then says the data governance organization, and 10% CDO is actually the people that's responsible for it. And then 5% say there's no data owner. Now, if we look at global trends in terms of data management, is the US is leading a lot of this. It's picking up quite a lot in the UK. But locally, we are heading down a technical recession where people don't really want to invest a lot of time and effort within IT. The ripple effect of that towards what we're trying to achieve from a data governance perspective is quite big. The main reason being is they now see data governance as an IT initiative because IT, for lack of a better word, says that they own the data. You go and you say, listen, I need to implement SAP MDG to manage my master data. These are the strategic reasons for this. These are the balances and checks I've done. This is the business case for it. This can really put our company in a better spot in terms of managing things across our entire SAP landscape. How do I get that business case approved if there's a notion that the IT department owns the data? Because now it's just IT knocking on business's door again, asking for money for systems. The conversation, however, slightly changes if you get an owner within business that says, listen, I understand the value of having a centralized master data governance platform. I understand the value of having accurate data. I understand the value of having timeliness data, et cetera, et cetera. They can then be your change agents within the organization to say, listen, I'm allocating some of my budget towards this, and I'm leveraging you to get this done for me. If it's a sole IT thing and IT is running with it, it's a really difficult discussion to have because what do you fix? We've decided now, for argument's sake, within our own organization, we are going the MDG route. What is the first things that we're moving on to MDG? Who's making that decision? Business, to a certain extent, wasn't necessarily involved from day one. So now you have to retrospectively go back, ask them, listen, we have this great idea. We have this platform which we think it's going to solve a lot of your problems. But we need some direction from you in terms of what are the things that we need to build on this platform from day one. And then they sort of run for their heels because all of a sudden they feel like, you've left me out of all of this and all of these processes. Now you're coming to me, asking me what it is that I need to focus on. Getting back to a few of the previous slides is in terms of building that bridge, it should be something that is done from day one. If the ownership is assigned within business as it should be, the conversations in terms of what do we fix, how do we fix it, and what are the things we're going to do to get to that required end state is a much easier discussion to have. And I can understand the reason why IT does this. Coming from a strong IT background myself, is we get into a mindset is we feel that we want to solve the world's problems. We can see that business is suffering. We can see where the inefficiencies are. We can see from an outside in the things that's breaking the systems, things that's causing systems not to talk to one another. We can see where the lineages are broken. But at the end of the day, looking back at this it's also in a sense our own fault because it's a journey that we should have taken with them from day one. It's good for us to have this holistic picture of where the problems are, but if they are not privy to this from day one and not part of this journey to sort of build something, it's like going out, seeing a property, saying this is my property, then IT comes in, they build the entire house, and when they're done, they leave and they say, here's the keys to your house that you asked for. You were not consulted in the blueprints of that. You were not consulted in terms of what it is that your exact requirements are. You're not consulted in terms of the rates and the taxes that all of a sudden you now need to pay from this beautiful home that they've given you. And sometimes we also overcomplicate things. I don't think data governance should be one of those things where we overcomplicate everything and we try to do everything from day one. There's a lot of quick wins, very small things that we can do that actually moves the needle. There is a few catches, however. Some of the things that we've tried to test to see how it works is we've identified that there's a massive gap currently from a data perspective, that we can see that because IT is sort of seen as the owners of the data and the owners of the platforms and the owners of the licenses and all the fancy tools and all these things, business feels left out. Now, if we sort of change it on its head and we say, business, you are the owners of it, and ideally these BI tools that you've been giving us all the years, you should actually be using this to drill down your own reports, to get your own stuff, to manage your own master data, to do your own things. The conversation also changes again, because now all of a sudden they feel empowered to do what they need to do. And from an IT perspective, there's a bit of frustration because you've been working on this platform for years and now you're handing it to a person that's sort of new to this. Span of control is also really important. You're obviously not going to give them full admin rights on the database to go and delete everything. But you need to give them access to the things that they need to make the right decisions. And at the end of the day, if business wins, everyone wins. So their upskilling is really important. Get business trained, and specifically in the BI toolset. This is one of the initiatives that we've done. We got them involved. We showed them how the tool works. We plugged it into their data. We've taken them through a full day training to show them how the data set works, how the tool set works, how you can manipulate the data, how you can add things in there, how you can fix things, how you can aggregate it. And at the end of the day, sorry, let me just scan that one. At the end of the day, it really did add value in terms of them now feeling that, listen, for the first time ever, I can actually have access to the things that I need access to. I can actually make the decisions that I need to do. And it also, in the long term, it alleviates pressure on IT, because you're also coming back to that mentality of, I want to always fix things and I always want to be there when business needs me. Letting go just a little bit really goes a long way. First of all, it builds trust between you and business, because now you're trusting them with the platform and you're trusting them with their own data. And secondly, it is they sort of feel like you're standing behind them and you're giving them the ability to actually do what they need to do. Other things that you can look at that we've done, and there's a lot of training things happening, there's monthly data stewardship councils, is to maybe create a little weekly session for a specific work group that tackles specific data requirements. So we're going through a few interesting projects, and one of those projects is trying to identify just, what does the customer actually look like across 17 systems? Because in every system, it's either highly aggregated or it's extremely low level, and we can't really find the lineage between those things. But if we have to wait for a formalized data governance structure to be put in place, for everyone to be assigned their roles, for the staff complement that we're shorting about 50 people that needs to be filled, and for people to get mature in terms of understanding the business and the systems, et cetera, we're going to be 2-3 years down the line and have not accomplished anything. So the focus there is look at something small that you can fix, get a few people together in a room, help drive that innovation and change and facilitate it. As a data custodian or a data facilitator within your organizations, be the person that that's the glue that holds the two parties together. In a lot of the environments that you'll find where you have SAP ERP systems along with other technologies, there's always that sort of disconnect between the other teams and the SAP team. The best way to do that is sort of create cross-functional teams. We've accomplished that by sort of incorporating our BW team with our enterprise data warehousing team. So you have your SAP BW specialists working very closely to your Oracle guys. And in such way, seeing them as a single team, it bridges a lot of gaps from an IT perspective. But then also getting them in the room from a BI perspective and analytics and MDM and the rest of it is getting the right stakeholders around the room, getting people to work together towards a common goal.
Hi. Yeah, well, good. Have you been for yours already?
Then, the things, can you just mute? I'm not sure if that is. Okay. One of the other things that we've done now that also really helps is you're getting in towards the big data of things. And with big data comes a lot of complexity. First of all, is if you're trying to manage your own cluster, you need your own expertise. Secondly, is if you go down that route, business also needs to get an understanding of you can't do things the same way that you did them before when you start migrating to these new technologies. And there we've set up weekly work groups with business to unpack to say, listen, these are the things that you want to do. These are the things that how you can accomplish it on those platforms. And it really does help because it instills trust both ways. One is you sort of acknowledge that you know that business is not technical, but you try to explain it to them. And the other thing is if they can start seeing what the complexity around this is and know what the limitations are, they will not create expectations for themselves or the rest of the business units in terms of what can be done from a platform perspective. And this goes all around the board. This is towards your master data, reference data, your BI, your data warehousing. All of that is there needs to be a hand-holding between the two business units at all times. And data, and that's why the CDO role is such an important thing, because you need somebody that is completely unbiased, that sits between those two BUs, and that always acts in the interest of the organization as well as the interest of the data at the end of the day. So just some tips that you can look at. First of all is change is going to happen. If you're going to link a lot of these things and link it to specific people and the people leave, your initiatives will die out. So please do not do that. Secondly is ensure that you have a clearly defined constitution for your data management initiative. What are the things that you want to achieve? What are the things that you feel is part of your mandate? What are the main areas of concern that you are addressing through this? If you're going to note everything in there, just know that you're going to try and do everything. Keep it small with regards to the people that you have, the capability that you have, but also sort of have a progressive plan in there in terms of how you see this scaling or growing over the next few months. Thirdly is ensure that the core team members are vested and aligned towards a common goal. You need people that can work together, that can see things in terms of the interest of the organization and not necessarily their own interests. Data people, unfortunately, are very scarce. You get very few people that are truly born to work with data, that truly love working with data. And this is not necessarily on the analytics side. I'm talking about data governance and data management as a function. You need somebody that has that sort of view that can help you drive that team, that core team, and get the people around the room and, facilitate sessions to get things done. Fourthly is probably one of the most important things in this list, and it's also one of the most difficult things, is to get executive buy-in. Unfortunately, with a lot of these things, you're going to need money and funds to do stuff. It's either going to be to buy licenses for something or to get some platforms to explore or to hire new resources or even to attend seminars or go to conferences. If you can get that one person, and it would be good to start with somebody like the CFO to get their buy-in to say, listen, I want you to support me in this because these are the benefits that I can do for you. So there's going to be some groundwork and some homework on your end in terms of defining what those risks are and quantifying sort of the picture for them to have this discussion. To say, listen, I'm asking you for 100,000 Rand for year one, but the benefits that I can see from that is probably 10 or 20-fold that. Speak to other people and find a rhythm that works for you. Unfortunately, data management is not a one-size-fits-all. Every organization is unique. Every organization has unique challenges, albeit cultural challenges, political challenges, the way the organization is structured, or just overall in terms of complexity of legacy systems. Try and find something that really works for you that you know is feasible within the context of your organization, but also challenging the status quo in terms of how people actually see data. And also speaking to other people from other organizations. Spend time with people that has gone through this. Spend time with people that are on a similar journey than what you are. Unpacking those things to say, listen, I'm looking at this product set. I'm looking at, for instance, implementing Lumira or implementing BW or implementing S4HANA or MDG or whatever else it might be. How did you do this? What are the things that you looked at? What are the things that you can really tell me that because even from people that have really failed miserably at this, there's something to be learned. And it's something that can build a common knowledge base that we can then use going forward. Data governance is not sexy, unfortunately. No matter how much you try to dress this thing up and get it out there and get people convinced that data governance is great, and it's and if we look at global trends, people start talking about data science and big data and machine learning, and that's sort of seen as like the sexy stuff to do with data. And then when you start talking about data governance, people, instantly you start feeling constricted because it's this old thing, and it's, you feel like you can't do things, and it's just rules and sets and rules. But it is something that can be fun. We've managed to do this a few times, is to create core teams to drive this and tackle challenges and do things together as a team. And for none of us, it was actually our main function at that stage. It was just something that we saw that there was a need, and we've done it. And once you can show that value, it really does add up overall to the team's entropy, because all of a sudden they feel like they've added value. And secondly, it helps you in the longer run once you've started to establish some basic rules, guiding principles and ways of work. Then be ready to fail a few times. It is going to happen that you will fail. Maybe you're just one of those lucky people that do a lot of research and you've spent years and years of training yourself up for this moment, and you have all the skill set and all the knowledge, and the organization is pretty stable and things just fall into place from day one. Then you're extremely lucky. But in most instances, it will be that you put in all this time and effort. You put in 6 months worth of work, and then something just changes and everything fails. Take that as a learning opportunity, try to build it out, and see how you can structure this so the next time around when it does happen, you don't go through the same things. Then one of the main things that's always sort of been close to my heart is the fact that there is no such thing as best practice. If there was something as a best practice, every organization would have had the same rule book with the same 10 things, doing the same 10 things, and everybody would be successful with it. There is, however, leading practices out there, and one of those that you can really look at and consider is the DAMO framework. I suspect most of you, predominantly everyone on this call, should ideally know what that is and where to find it. It's a good framework for you to start understanding. If you look at data governance in totality, one of the things that you need to consider, it might be that all the pillars do not exist within the organization. We've been really struggling with data architecture as a function, for instance, for many years now, where from a master data perspective, we're doing really good. Reference data, we're doing really good. Data warehousing and BI doing really good. Data science, great. But when it comes to, and even data interoperability, data storage, all those things doing really great. But when it comes to data architecture, you're falling behind. And there's a ripple effect across all those things. So also identify what are the main things that you want to actually govern within your organization. What are the things that you want to bring together to help you drive change and to sort of get to that next level of data ownership. Then there's a book, and I don't know how many of you have read it or has seen it, but Peter Eichen has wrote a book about the case for the Chief Data Officer. I think it's about 76 pages, if I'm not mistaken. But in this book is essentially an executive summary of why it is important to have data governance within your organization, why it should be a function on its own within a other BU within business rather than within IT. It tells you what are the rationales for moving things in a specific area, for investing time and money. Interesting things that comes out there, for instance, is the fact that people have tried to do these things before and they've failed. So a good example is company has spent 90 million Rand on a data management initiative. They've bought licenses, they've hired people, they've gone through the notion. And 3 years into the program, they just decide to call it quits because the thing is not working. If you go to the upfront valuation of what is the actual inherent risk of this and what is required to fix this, you could have actually gotten to the conclusion that you actually needed to spend 95 million or even 100 million Rand to make the problem go away and to actually fix it. Now you have put down a significant investment of 90 million rand. And in that instance, it might have actually been better to do nothing rather to embark on the program. So unfortunately, with things like data governance, is do not skimp on the really important things. There is quick wins. There's things that will not cost you a lot of money to do from day one. There are things that will cost you a lot of money once it comes to licensing and platforms. There are things that will add up quite significantly to cost over the long run, but that will add value. But in order to have that picture, you need to do a proper landscape study of your own organization. And that's sort of where data architecture becomes a critical role to have. One of the other things that we've also seen is in some of the teams, they start driving data management on their own because there's no direction from an organization perspective. Determine what is your corporate strategic objectives. If you have an IT department, determine what those IT strategic objectives are, and then align your data objectives and your data strategy to those other two. It doesn't help you saying, listen, we have to have single record of a customer, we have to have a 360 view, we have to have one central master data platform and, but the company strategy is to put down 5 platforms, for instance, and your IT strategy is to look at specific vendors, which doesn't then support the requirement that you put down. So there's a golden thread that goes through all these things. Very good read case for Chief Data Officer. I want to close with a few things and then we can open it up for questions. But just some thoughts from my side is the data community within South Africa is relatively small, and we're seeing that the community really struggles when it comes to we're all sort of facing the same problems. We're going through the same things. We have the same ups, the same downs, but somehow we never built that knowledge base, and then a year later we find ourselves with new people in the room where we've now overcome these things. Is look at how you can partner with people within the same knowledge domain to help share information, to have those discussions, to see how people can leverage from it. Data governance being something that's really old, but the notion of a CDO is relatively new. We've not given this the necessary support required within organization as we should have. And it can be that we are all just wrong and data governance is not something that we should look at. But I'm forever hopeful and forever positive to think that if data governance is done properly and you have the right people and the right teams and you're focusing on the right things, it can be the thing that steers your company in a different direction. And it doesn't have to be something that is your responsibility. It's not something that should be on your job spec that says you are a data management expert and you should do these things. Everybody has to start somewhere. And if you start out small and you just sort of conquer these little battles, at the end of the day, it does add up and it does add value. And you can see that once you start showing tangible benefit from this, people will automatically buy in. And it comes back to the quote earlier in terms of if we stop focusing on the wrong things, the right things will start finding us. If we just focus on the things that we know that is in our span of control and things that we have control over, and see how we can make those little things better. At the end of the day, all of those things add up. So with that, thank you for everyone. Can we maybe open it up for some questions for a few minutes? Okay, if we have no questions, thanks to everyone. Have a great Monday.
Hello.
Hi.
Just one question.
Yes.
Have you recorded your session?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Are you gonna give that to us by any chance?
Yes, I'm going to make it available to Stacy or Tracy, and then she'll make it available to everyone.
Okay, thank you very much.
Cool, no problem.
Thanks for the session. It was very informative. And good
Okay,
to
thank
know.
you.
Hi everyone, this is Indri Muller here. I chair the EIM and Analytics SEC. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and your journey with us. From my side, and I'm sure everyone will agree with me, you've definitely cleared up some of the myths and the challenges surrounding data governance. We really appreciate your time. Great presentation.
Thanks so much. Hope to speak to you guys soon.
Will do. Thank you, everyone. I've sent you a message. I hope to see all of you at Sapela in June. Let's make some more magic. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.